Disney's live-action remakes are getting more and more common. They used to release one or two per year, but lately it seems we got one every few months. We got Dumbo in March, we had Aladdin releasing in May last month, and we have Lion King due out next month. And finally, the sequel to Maleficent in October. That's 4 for 2019. 5 if you count the adaptation of Lady and the Tramp that's releasing on Disney Plus later this year. With so many of these remakes coming out, it's rubbing some people the wrong way, and I can understand why. It's easy to look at all these adaptations/remakes and come to the conclusion that Disney's being unoriginal, that they're producing cash grabs and not really creating anything new. I can't really fault those people for thinking that way about Disney, but the truth is, I think the company is getting a bad rap. Or the wrong kind of bad rap. I want to make it clear. Disney is still producing original live-action movies. In fact, their original movies are the reason they produce so many remakes these days. The remakes are almost necessary. Now, that seems a bit melodramatic, but I can explain. Well, first let's talk about Disney at the box office. Looking at the company as a whole, it's easy to think that everything Disney releases is box office magic. Just look at their 2019 lineup. In terms of market share, Disney is by far Hollywood's biggest studio. A lot of that success comes from their subsidiaries, like Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Pixar. I don't need to go in depth about how popular the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars are, but both series have generated billions of dollars. And that's only counting the movies, not the merchandise, licensing, or what have you. Pixar movies are almost always smashes as well, with the recent example being The Incredibles 2, which grossed $1.2 billion at the box office last year. But those aren't all that Disney has. They also have their own original studio, Walt Disney Pictures. This studio is for movies released under the main Disney banner, the real Disney movies, so to speak. So that includes all their animated movies, like Snow White, Aladdin, Lion King, and Frozen, to name a few. And the semi-controversial but massively popular live-action remakes. Besides those, Walt Disney Pictures also produces original Disney live-action movies. Yes, you heard that right. Disney does make original live-action movies. These Disney originals, as we'll call them, never quite reached the heights that the company's animated movies have. But that doesn't mean they weren't successful. For a long time, they made up most of Disney's output as a studio. Pirates of the Caribbean is by far the biggest Disney original franchise, with each of the movies being box office smashes. And the earlier ones even doing pretty well critically. Another iconic Disney original is Mary Poppins, which is the first Disney movie ever to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Besides those, you have hits like The Chronicles of Narnia, well, the first two in that series, and National Treasure. Sure, they're not on a scale of a Pirates or a Poppins, but they're still very well known. Because they were cheaper and quicker to make than animations, the originals were the backbone of Disney's production for many years. Sadly, they recently fell out of favor with both audiences and Disney itself. You see, back in 2012, Disney released a little movie called John Carter. The movie was produced on a budget of $263 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made. That wasn't even the whole investment, though. Disney wanted to make this a franchise, like another Pirates, so they pushed this thing hard and spent another $90 million on marketing it. Unfortunately, all that marketing didn't amount to much, because the movie bombed commercially, and only made back $284 million. That was a disaster, and it caused a $200 million loss for Disney. The reasons behind the failure are best left for another video. But the facts remain that Disney took a massive bet on a live-action original movie and lost. Compare that with the $1 billion that Alice in Wonderland grossed in 2010. And remember, that was only the first in the current wave of live-action remakes. Anyway, let's move on. In 2013, just a year after John Carter, Disney released The Lone Ranger, a western starring Johnny Depp. This was another big-budget Disney original. It cost around $375 million to produce and market, but ended up making back only $260 million. This was actually recent enough that I remember seeing the ads for it, and I remember just not caring about The Lone Ranger. It's a pretty old property, so that could be one of the reasons why it did so bad. All in all, Disney lost another $150 million on The Lone Ranger. And more importantly, they lost another bet on a live-action original. Just a year later, Maleficent, the second live-action remake, was released, and it grossed $758 million worldwide. Are you starting to notice a pattern here? In March 2015, Disney released the third live-action remake, Cinderella, which was a commercial success. It grossed around $540 million on a budget of $100 million, and it even did well critically, with a solid 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. Just 2 months later, in May 2015, Disney released Tomorrowland, a live-action original that grossed $209 million on a production budget of $190 million. It looks like a small success at first, but factoring in marketing costs, Disney lost around $130 million. Personally, I think that's a shame because Tomorrowland is one of my favorite Disney movies. It's flawed, but if you know the futurism of the Disney company in the 50s and 60s, it's quite a treat. But I'll save my fanboying for another time. Now, where was I? Oh yes, right. I could go on and on. The BFG, in 2016, lost around $100 million. In March 2018, A Wrinkle in Time was released and went on to lose $130 million. A few months later, in November, The Nutcracker and the Four Realms also failed, losing another $65 million. Now, let's look at the remakes. A few months before the BFG, Disney released The Jungle Book, which grossed nearly $1 billion and got rave reviews. It was a total success, and it's even getting a sequel in 2020. In 2017, the remakes hit a new height. Beauty and the Beast grossed $1.2 billion, making it the biggest live-action remake so far. And really, the second biggest Walt Disney Pictures movie ever, only behind Frozen. That brings me to my point. The numbers don't lie. Disney's live-action remakes make a lot more money than their live-action originals do. Even critically, the remakes are at least consistently decent, if not great. On the other hand, the originals usually get mixed to negative reviews. There are exceptions, of course. Alice Through the Looking Glass, a sequel to a remake, totally bombed in 2016, and Into the Woods, an original, did great both financially and critically in 2014. But overall, the fact is that Disney hasn't stopped producing original movies, even after all the failures. These were all risks, big budget risks at that, and most clearly didn't pay off. Still, they're trying. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not defending the recent originals. In my opinion, most of them are mediocre at best. Well, except Tomorrowland. I'm just saying that you can't say Disney isn't trying. Honestly, if Disney was as unoriginal as detractors say it is, Walt Disney Pictures would have stopped at John Carter and only released remakes since then. Next year, they're releasing Artemis Fowl and Jungle Cruise, both of which have a decent chance at breaking their losing streak with originals. I sure hope Disney figures out what they're doing wrong here, because I'm a fan of both of these franchises and I really want them to do well. All that said, even though they haven't quit live-action originals, Disney, more specifically Walt Disney Pictures, can't afford to release constant box office disappointments. As the flagship studio of the whole company, Disney can't afford to have it release live-action flops. It hurts confidence in the brand. That's where the remakes come in. Yes, they're unoriginal. Yes, they're nostalgia traps. But they're proven to work, and clearly resonate with most moviegoers. And really, to shareholders and executives, live-action success is live-action success, whether it be through a remake or an original movie. So until the originals return to profitability, let's make do with the flood of remakes heading our way. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If it wasn't clear enough, I'm a big fan of Disney, and I'm planning to do a lot more of these videos. There's a lot to go over. Until then, feel free to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. See you guys later.